You know, the one point that Joe actually didn't say in his address last night was that if you look historically, I think his list was Apple, Microsoft, Google. Niklas added Skype. Many of the most disruptive technology companies have been founded in what were regarded at the time as downturns, crashes, crunches, whatever you want to call them. And so, you know, obviously the people with large pools of capital to deal with have a separate set of concerns. But if you're coming at this from the point of view of innovation, disruption, which is where, in fact, all the great recent fortunes and great companies have come from, it doesn't make any, I mean, it really, in fact, arguably one of the cases you could make is that right now is the cheapest time to start companies that you could probably, in the last bust, what were the major items people spent money on? Marketing and servers. Why Sun Microsystems was such.
And people.
Well, and people. Now you still have to do the people, but you can rent the servers from Jeff Bezos. Everyone's figured out that marketing, if you're clever, is not, now that we have a ubiquitous internet, is relative, bloggers and all this other stuff, you can actually kind of do that on the cheap as well. So in fact, you know, a company with $10 million in the bank and a burn rate of $300,000 or $400,000 a month, which is typical of, I think, a lot of the companies that we've talked about here, has, you know, 4 years worth, which is getting out toward Jeff Montgomery's time frame of when you need to start. So therefore, you know, it's certainly not a terrible time to innovate. And I wanted to just, you know, I mean, I think we want to just sort of, you know, it's one of the famous imponderables is that it's not a true innovation if it was foreseeable. And, you know, that's the great trick in all this is if it were obvious what a smart person would do now, well, there are lots of smart people in the world and there's still enough money around that we'd all do it. And so, but with that caveat, I wanted to, I guess we'll do ladies first.
Okay.
And ask Esther, you know, I mean, you know, if you had to look at the horizon, where is the meteor coming from? Where do you look in the sky?
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do is I have 4 big but brief points I want to make. And you can either ask about them now on the panel or you can catch me at the cocktail party. These are the things I keep talking about that people keep seeming to ignore. And if I hadn't spent all my money trying to go into space, I would be funding them.
Yeah, Esther's going to space.
No, I'm just training right now. Can't afford the real
She's
trip.
been in I've had to keep calling her in Moscow. So.
Yeah, right. So they're very simple. They're called user-generated data, the physical world, overloaded by data, and emerging markets.
You got to unpack each of those.
I'm going to.
3 sentences. Okay.
3 sentences. User-generated data. I'm fascinated by the fascination people find in their own data. They generate it, they put it up, they show it to their friends, they compare themselves to one another. A forerunner of this was Hot or Not. Some of the companies that are interesting in that area right now are 23andMe, which is your own genome, and what the genome means long-term for healthcare. People are learning suddenly to manage their identities online. They're always going to learn to manage their bodies. With luck, they'll start eating better and drinking better and maybe not staying up so late courtesy of MySpace, but regardless. Skydeck lets you do that with your telephone calls and your SMSs. See whom you call most. Get a reminder, oh, gee, I haven't talked to Michael Guerin in 3 months, and I talked to him 4 times in the previous 3 months, so maybe I should give him another ring, or who knows. I can make up my own mind. And the whole notion that the grown-ups find so surprising of, my gosh, how do these kids keep track of all this stuff? Isn't it? Well, that's what they spend 2 or 3 hours a day managing. That was the first one. The second one, GPS. People and everything else is going to have a location. Everything's going to be queryable, from the temperature of the swimming pool to whether a hotel room is occupied. Where did I leave my cell phone? It's going to have an RFID thing and remind me when I leave it on a table or something. So suddenly it's not just the virtual world, but now the physical world also becomes present in the virtual world. Overloaded by data, that's a term I picked up from Tim Hanlon this morning, but you've heard it before. We're going to move from searching for scarce information to filtering ourselves from an overload of information. Everything's going to become filtering, personalization, whatever. And a great quote from Bill Gates, he said this over dinner at the D conference. He did not say it on stage, which surprised me. The future of search is verbs. In other words, I don't really want to search for information. I'm online to accomplish some task. I want to book a hotel room, find a number so I can call a friend, find a red dress so I can buy it. And the search engines, all this natural language stuff is going to be focused much more on, quote, the so-called semantic web, where data is executable. It's not just text on a screen, but you can make things happen. So the challenge is to devise the user interfaces and also the APIs that are actually going to make the web much more alive rather than just a sea of data. And then the final thing, I keep trying, emerging markets. They've been in crisis so long, they're going to handle it a lot better. Those are mine.
Okay, and Niklas, and by the way, I should remind everybody that Niklas actually has two hats. He's the co-chairman, correct, of Joost, but he's also co-founder of Atomico, which is a VC operation in London, correct?
Yeah,
okay,
correct.
Good.
Yeah.
Same question.
Yeah. So, well, I think I would answer it differently. I would say Europe. I think that what we have seen in Europe when we started Skype in 2002, and we went around and tried to raise money and to start this company. People thought we were nuts and kind of advised us to get a real job and not to do anything, because how could you do anything with internet and new technologies and isn't this whole .com thing all just a bust? But what we see now, and you also see a lot of examples here, I think at the conference as well, that there's a lot of great entrepreneurs coming out here in Europe and starting new companies here. So I think that we're starting to have a really, really good ecosystem of entrepreneurs and investors. And so I think Europe is certainly, I'm looking more not into like these certain sectors that we want to look into. We're looking into finding the right talent and betting on the right entrepreneurs who have the great groundbreaking ideas. Okay.
And by the way, this is, as soon as anybody has the slightest impulse to ask a question, just shoot up your hand, because this is our last little gasp. This is your chance.
They should serve the cocktails here.
Well, I mean, Esther is, I wish, in fact, yeah, bring them on, please. Is, all of them. Is there a Google idea in your list of 4? If you had to put your finger on one of them, the big $1 billion flyer.
Okay, well, I'm on the board of 23andMe, so this isn't coincidental. But one way or another, if I had to pick one, it would be that. Genetic information is incredibly rich. It's only the beginning. It is. You can think of all the different metaphors. It's the zeros and ones of humanity. It's content. It's not technology. It unlocks the secrets of ourselves. It doesn't unlock them very easily. Right. But if you asked me to pick one company, yeah, it would be that one.
Well, one of the things that's fascinating, I mean, this question of big and small is an interesting, is small the new big is the kind of cliche way of saying it. I mean, if you look around, and let's try to refocus on media a little bit. Recently, the Guardian Group, I don't know if Simon's still here, bought paid content, or what Content Next, I think, is the actual company. Condé Nast bought Ars Technica. Obviously, TechCrunch, if Michael Arrington were inclined to sell, he could get a fairly reasonable price for his operation. Are we going to see now, is that where people in media should be? I mean, it does seem like it's pretty easy to launch little sellable media companies.
It's kind of like the old guys trying to drink the fountain of youth. And it may work. Definitely, I think the big mistake a lot of the big companies make is that they think the technology is all that matters. And in the end, it's the people.
Well, in fact, the companies I just listed are technologically primitive. I mean, basically, they're all group blogs. I mean, you could run them all on movable type for whatever. It's not, there is no, Michael Arrington has a few little tricks that he's done. Yeah. But they're basically almost pure content companies, aren't they?
Right, and I think they're doing the right thing, which is not fussing about the technology, but acquiring people and properties that are exciting. And you know, let other people do the broadband and the build out and all these tools for more efficient trading of advertising, all the technology and algorithms. That's really exciting, but that's just going to make it all more competitive. Then the thing that's going to make it exciting is Tina Brown. It's
right. Well, there's another. I mean,
and
my
the same
one
thing in
question about that
advertising,
is doing it inside. And in fact, I don't know, Larry. Maybe you can correct me on this. Did they do? Are people at Daily Beast IAC employees, or are they a separate company?
No, I mean, it's funded by IAC, so whether they've set it up as a unit, it's irrelevant. They're in the IAC building. They're, you know, if they're set up in some other separate little entity, it doesn't matter.
But I mean, are they in the IAC benefits pool, and they have, or can they get shares, for instance? Can you give them equity?
And I'm not sure how they've done that since the breakup. I don't know how he's
Okay.
doing that stock, but I'm reasonably sure there is an equity stake for most of the people working there. There aren't that many people there right now.
So I think that's, you know, just to comment on this. Of course, you know, it's very much about the content, also about people, but also creating brands and getting the user traction. Because if a media company is acquiring a small startup, you cannot really bet on that the people who are there from the beginning are going to stay, because they're probably much more entrepreneurial, and they're most likely to leave and start another company. So what you need to make sure that you're buying something which is a network, is a platform, and can grow, and so you're not dependent on like one person who is like.
Well, in fact, yeah, I think interestingly, I know Ars Technica and I believe Contact Next as well. They're really keeping them very independent. They're not trying to, like ours. Everyone thought, oh well, Wired's going to just absorb Ars Technica. No, they're not. We're not going near them. And my question to you would be, on the assumption that you, to some extent, put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. Could you just run us through Atomico's portfolio right now and where you are putting your money?
Yeah, so, well, primarily what we're doing is trying to find, as I said, like entrepreneurs really early stage in Europe who have the big ideas that can be disruptive and make a big change. And many of the companies we've invested in are actually in the business of creating content, but not not in a traditional way. One company is, for example, Seismic, which is enabling people to have video conversations, which then becomes content. Another company is Woomi, which is a place where people can create sessions and have video chats for like 1 minute. It's essentially speed dating. And now what they're doing with that, they launched something called Woomi.tv. So this becomes the ultimate reality TV. So you have these sessions of people having kind of flirting for 1 minute.
And other people watching it?
And then other people watch that as a video. So this is a platform where this is really cool.
Right.
Like
it's the dating game. It's the internet version of the dating game.
It becomes TV.
Yeah, well, dating game was a show in America.
So when we think about like user-generated content, it's very much being people taking something that they've been ripping and uploading and saying this is it's user-generated, it's user-uploaded. But this is actually where content is being created by the universe of the users, and then others can then.
Is that live or is it?
No, it's not live, so it's being uploaded afterwards. So these are just two examples of where people are having dialogues, and that then becomes content for others to enjoy.
So I have a question about this. I understand people are also using it for selecting babysitters or people to share rides with, which I think is great. We're finding a lot of these business innovations come to us from the consumer world, and it makes business more efficient. Yeah. Let small businesses do what large businesses used to.
Yeah.
Douglas.
Just a question as you go about deciding what to invest in. It's clear that people it's clear that people love to do stupid things on the web, and we can never predict which stupid things will take off. So as you were deciding where to put your money, and someone walks in with this concept of 1 minute video chats that other people are going to voyeuristically be able to look at them, is it a gut thing, or how do you separate from this is stupid and really stupid, and this is stupid, but I think this stupid's going to take off?
It's as stupid as it's going to be great. I think there's obviously no kind of math or formula or anything like that, but then I think it needs to be a combination. You need to look at something that can become a platform, and something that is can be lasting rather than just a fad. So you see a lot of things which are stupid or crazy, which is fun and it spikes up and then it dies away. So what you want to look at things that have lasting value, but also things that actually can create real values. And so like, you know, with example of women, for example, it's utilizing new technology to do completely new type of online dating. We all know that online dating is a huge market. So here's a real, so for something like that, it's a real need, and it's a potential great value. So you need to look at if this can create real value, if it's something that's sustainable, platforms. But then at the end of the day, it's just also the people. I mean, if it's not the right, you know, the right people with an idea which is a bit off is probably okay because they can always repair. It's like a little bit like you write a battle plan when you go to war or something like that. But then when the first gun is shot, that battle plan is out, and you can have to improvise when you're on the go. So the most important thing is always the people.
I have a question. In a sense, are you just talking about that the web has now arrived at a point where, kind of post-technology point, where it's about programming and it's about bringing in producers, or in Tina's case, bringing in editors to start Talk Magazine online? It failed in one iteration. Let's try it, the same thing in another. I mean, that's what it's saying with the dating game. Are we just recycling a bunch of old ideas here?
It's all about timing. When we started Skype, we said we would do internet telephony. People, oh, this has been done before, it doesn't work. The reason why it worked for us was just about timing, because we did that.
But that's a pure technology play. I mean, you've created a high level of functionality, whereas what you're talking about now is essentially, you know, high concept. Let's see if run a good idea up the flag, or run a bad idea up the flag, and see if there's an audience for it. Yeah.
Well, you have to be willing to take risk. If you're trying to figure out, you know, beforehand if it's going to work or not, then you're probably going to pass on a lot of opportunities.
Well, and let me be more precise. Have you moved from the technology business into the producing, into show business?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't, you know, you don't want, what you want to do is that you don't want to kind of replicate. If you want to bring, like, you know, something that's creating content online, what's interesting is when you can do it with completely new models, so it doesn't become as heavy lifting as this traditional content production.
I want to see you and raise you one on that one. I think the real disruption here is that this fundamental notion of audiences and advertising is changing. If you want real disruption, it's the basic point that people are no longer passive. You saw it in the Obama campaign. You know, how real and persistent it will be this time around, I don't know, but it will be eventually. People are they're beginning to contribute. I mentioned their data. They're also contributing their content. They don't want to sit and watch ads. They want the marketers to engage with them. Yeah. They don't want to be put into a bucket. I don't want to go in a store and be told I'm a hello, middle-aged white lady. I want them to say, well, hi, Esther, welcome back. The skirt you bought last week, we have some shoes to go with it. So it becomes, the world becomes user-centric for each user. And the users pick and choose. They expect to be catered to. They produce content. In many cases, this stuff completely bypasses both the media and the advertising agencies, because the marketers have to learn to create content that users want to interact with, and it becomes much closer to PR than traditional advertising.
I'll just make one more point, because I absolutely agree with you, except you were just praising Tina before, probably one of the least interactive people on God's earth, but
that's her. I mean, whatever. It's not her site. Her site
statement.
is trying to be.
No, it's not. But well, that's okay.
Well, maybe the, you know, maybe the big shit. I mean, we had a panel early in this event called the two-way audience, and maybe that's the disruption. I mean, in fact, if you look around.
But the panel didn't really go into it.
Yeah, well, if you look around, no, but if you take a macro view, okay, if you look at the companies that are getting a lot of excitement now, it's the social networks, okay? if you look at Google, our friends from Google, where are they actually? They actually rebranded that little sign under the screen there that says YouTube. That was a week ago rebranding from Google to YouTube, because they've clearly made a decision that among the more interesting properties in the Google Armory is the most interactive. You know, Google itself is not particularly interactive. YouTube is very interactive.
Well, it's interactive, it's not social.
It's not, but I don't know, but social is a bad, because social, I'm not
Okay,
sure.
but it's not interactive with other people.
No.
And
Yeah.
that's the issue. People want to interact with people.
Well,
They
that's
don't
part
want to
of it.
interact
I put
with...
that in a subset, but
Yeah.
it's just in general,
Yeah.
it's the ability, you know, we've now gone, people now have the ability to come back the other way. And still there's a lot of people who hang, you know, we went through those numbers about what % actually post as opposed to one, you know, but those numbers, one thing we can probably say with some certainty, those numbers are going to all grow over time.
Right, because the marketers and the platform people and all these other guys haven't learned how to get these people to engage. But if you get, it's not that the people aren't willing. Most of these people go home and they actually do talk to people.
So-
The challenge is to get them to talk to people online.
So what's interesting here is that we have all this, the services themselves are very, very interactive, and as you said, where users are contributing and people want to interact with people. But then you have the advertisement on these kind of services are still very traditional, old style, like display ads. So I think there's a lot of innovations going to have to happen on the advertisement space, where the advertisers and the creators are coming up with how the users can much more interact with these ads, so that it becomes much more interesting and actually something that's appealing to people.
Well, I mean, if I were hiring somebody to do this, I'd go find somebody who's writing really good telemarketing scripts rather than someone that was writing ads, because you want someone who understands how to evoke interaction, or perhaps people who design polls, but somebody who knows how to carry on a conversation and take it down different branches.
Anybody else out there? There we go. No, it's important to record it for YouTube.
For posterity.
Hello. Hi, Mom. Okay, so here's my question. You said, Niklas, you said that when you look at ideas, when they come in your door, you want to see whether they can become a platform. And I would like if you could maybe just elaborate on that a little bit, because I've heard earlier NBC it describes there's an NBC platform, and Skype platform, Kazaa platform. I'm kind of curious what you look for.
Yeah. Well, so maybe we can, it doesn't necessarily need to be a platform, but it's something that can be sustainable, something that can almost grow by itself, where you don't have continuously to push it, like push new, create new content all the time, or market in order to get new users. You want to have things that can, once it gets going, it almost goes by itself in terms of, it can be, for example, like the bigger it becomes, you get network effects, because there are more people selling. For example, eBay is a good example. The more people selling on it, the more interesting it becomes to go there and to find goods. So I think that's kind of the key thing, where it becomes a network where it becomes self-sustainable.
And I think also, another classic thing is that other people can contribute to it.
Yes,
You get
exactly.
the energy of third parties. Basically, that's the key thing, is getting that outside aspect. We got one here.
Yes, hello, Gabe McIntyre from Mobuzz TV. I've heard a lot about advertising, engagement, transparency, social, but really, when I look around and I look at the successes, there is just one key element, and that word I have not heard a lot here at all, and that's enrichment. Enriching people's lives in one way or another, and if you can do that, then people will become loyal and they keep on working it.
Of course.
What kind of value system do you look at? How will this enrich a person's life when you're looking at new businesses or ideas? Is it going to disrupt their life in a good way or a bad way? Disruption, enrichment.
Yeah. That's a very valid point, and that's where if you need to look at companies who can solve some real problem. Like they can be, for example, that saves people time, or they can save them money, or they can just give them good entertainment value. But at the end of the day, if it solves something real, a real problem, then that's when you can create real values. So, and you all, I mean, I think it's important to always look into, you know, what kind of, what does this do for people, rather than like, oh, this is very cool technology. Because we see there's a lot of those things which are pretty cool technologies, but what does it solve?
Well, in fact, if memory serves, some version of enrichment has been in the Microsoft mantra for Windows since day one. I mean, that's been a repeated sell. Is that this?
That's aspirational.
Yeah. John Cummings.
I'm interested in hearing about where the advances are being made in sociology inside organizations who are pushing the future rather than technology, in that groups tend to attract people just like them. And if we want to create something really interesting in the most valued services via mobile, or the most interesting things that can be done with linear content, but in new interactive ways, doesn't that require us to put together for somebody to architect a groups of people who would never otherwise choose to meet each other, and actually bring those groups together to try and mess around and fail, get to know each other, build trust, and out of that, get something different? Which organizations are already doing that, and is that a path to go down?
Well, certainly Google mentions that it has anthropologists and so forth, but let me take your question and answer a slightly different one anyway, which was Joe Schondorf's comment last night about his daughter. She's not going to work, she's going to work for other people who have Facebook pages. And one half of me says, wow, that is way cool. Bad companies will go out of existence because nobody's going to go work for them. And then I go to the airport and I get mistreated by unhappy airline employees. And I realize that, as Bill Gibson said, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. But at the leading edge, definitely, companies are going to have to be better places to work, because information about how much fun it is to work at them, and I mean deep, enriching fun, not frivolous fun, is going to be much more available. And companies, I think you're seeing a fundamental economic shift in terms of where the returns go. It's much harder to be a company these days. Employees are more demanding, consumers are more demanding, and so the poor little guy trying to make a profit off his capital has a really tough time, and that's perhaps the most disruptive shift of all.
I think it's very basic that, like, if you have organizations where people are really passionate about, they don't think it is, if you know, you're successful when they don't think I'm going to the job, but they think that, you know, I'm part of this team, and they're like become really passionate, and then they have a good time, and that's how, you know, how you can create a good environment, and that also results in good products. So you don't have the situation with this person on the airplane or on,
Yeah.
which gives you bad service because they cannot identify themselves with a company.
Well, it's the joke about the guy riding along the street, the road, and he sees a man laying bricks and asks the guy what he's doing, and the first guy says, well, duh, I'm laying bricks. And the second guy says, I'm building a cathedral. And the third guy says, I'm honoring God. And you want people to feel they're honoring God in what they're building. Exactly. Or maybe just enriching people's lives.
On that cheerful note, it's 5 o'clock, if I reckon right. So thank you all. And it's been a great conference. I've actually had